Good afternoon, and welcome to Grand Valley's first annual series of Tech Talks. And this annual piece is something I just improvised that went out on a limb. And if the President Mantella is not in support, I will need all the witnesses here to back me how amazing of an event this was, and it's going to be. So I'm honored to stand here before you and host and introduce three amazing Grand Valley State University leaders who will share some of their experiences and interests and work that they're currently performing across our university and our campuses. They range from artificial intelligence to extended reality. And while those two are two different sets of tools and technologies, you will see a lot of opportunities of how they intersect, interact, and help each other, and ultimately help all of us succeed and accomplish what we want to do. First, we will have three 10-minute long tech talks. Please hold your questions for the end, because once the presentations have been concluded, we're going to have a panel, and we will get into all of your questions, comments, and concerns. And we'll obviously love to learn from all of you as well. So our first presenter and speaker today is Zach DeBrine, Assistant Professor of Computing, whose talk is focused on AI, artificial intelligence, in a brave new world. And as you know, in the last year or so, we've all heard about ChatGPT and everything else, and all of a sudden every single product is an AI product. Not true. But you will see and learn about some of the opportunities of where these tools and technologies could be of help and actually solve practical problems for us all. Current research, or one of current research interests for Zach, is development of AI software in partnership with research and local healthcare organizations in pharmacogenomics. So I had to look that up and make sure I pronounce it the right way. But the impact of it is monumental. It is really looking at how individuals' genes impact and influence how that individual processes medication. So Zach, the podium is yours.
Thank you, Milos. What a pleasure to be here. It's an exciting time to be here with AI and our brave new world that we're beginning to see. We're living through a revolution, and I want to make the case for just how big this revolution is. So I think we're looking at something that's more than the sum of the computer and the internet combined in its potential here. And let's talk about both the computer and the internet. Think about the 1980s, when computers were clunky mechanical machines that filled university rooms. And the only people who really knew how to use these in the 1980s were university faculty, national labs, and their PhD students. But in 10 years, we went from clunky machines filling rooms to calculators the size of an iPad. And in 10 more years, we all had computers in our homes. 20 years from research grade through proof of concept to everyone having access. Think about the internet. In 1990, where was the internet? It was a research grade product. It was not offered to everyone. It wasn't very useful. But in just 10 years, we were all online. And we thought we were accessing this amazing wealth of knowledge. But look back 20 years, 30 years, how little knowledge was actually on the internet 20 years ago. Where have we come? We've got phones. This phone is more powerful than a 1987 supercomputer. And it's got more knowledge that on this single device than we had on the entire internet in 1995. Think about ChatGPT. I'll pick on this one. ChatGPT in 2023, 1 year. And how many people have used it? More people have used it than used the internet in 5 years when it first came out, in just a couple months. What's ChatGPT going to look like if it's still around in 10 years? 10 years. We've got self-driving cars in beta. This is a testament to image processing and recognition. These cars can drive in ice storms. They can handle winds. They can navigate dicey accident situations that we might run into. That's where we're at today. Where's that going to be in 10 years? 5 years, or even 2? I think we're going to be fundamentally changing the way we interact with technology. We have computers, we have the internet, we all have a laptop, we work on it. We have things like Copilot that allow us to code in parallel with an AI assistant. We have AI assistants that manage our email inbox for us. We have ChatGPT, which generates homework assignments for us. This is already transformative, but this is just the English language. This is just language in general, natural language processing. We have self-driving cars. That's image recognition, image processing, convolutional neural networks. But what are the hundreds of domains of knowledge that are still research grade that have not yet emerged? And in this room, we have 150 domain experts. You all are experts in something. You all have inputs, you all have outputs, and you do lots of things with those inputs and outputs using your domain expertise every day. So what does ChatGPT not do that you do? What does, AI do that you could use? And so now is the time to develop these interdisciplinary collaborations where you take your domain knowledge, you say, these are my inputs, these are my outputs. Can I find someone who knows AI and automate this? You can use off-the-shelf products. You can be a follower. You can be a passenger in this revolution. But I want to make the point that we need to be leaders, not just early adopters. We need to be leaders. And there's hundreds of domains of knowledge. If we can get AI for each domain of knowledge, we empower ourselves for a more synthesized, uniform AI across many domains. So I'll share a little personal example of how we're using AI to make a tangible impact in healthcare. So my training is as a cell molecular biologist. I get my undergrad in biochemistry, my PhD in structural biology. During COVID, I had an empty dissertation chapter, so I went in my basement and learned bioinformatics, which is biology plus computing. That was my first exposure to coding. I never took a computer programming class. Then that went well, so during my postdoc I did more bioinformatics, and then came here to GVSU to lead up a research team around high-performance bioinformatics, which is also, I like to call that artificial genomic intelligence, because it is. But the point is, we got to this place without ever having formal computing education. Why? There was experiential learning throughout my entire career. I'm a firm believer in experiential learning. But I'm also a firm believer in solving problems in the real world, not just filling out multiple choice questions on a textbook exam or memorizing lecture slides. But this interest in high-performance bioinformatics grew into a collaboration with Corewell Health. And so Corewell Health has a very great interest in growing into this AI scene, bringing AI to healthcare. Unlike ChatGPT, there's much more regulation in healthcare. There's much more safety need. There's much more complexity to that landscape. We need safe models. We need good models. And so one of our research areas are how do we design models of genomic intelligence, not English natural language processing, not computer image recognition, but genomic intelligence to take a patient's blood draw, a patient's DNA sequence, feed it into an AI model, and allow a clinician to ask questions of that model that solve their need for that patient at that bedside in that room right now. And we don't want to be putting a tool in the hands of clinicians that they haven't built. And so I want to emphasize this AI interface. The clinician needs to be the one training the AI. We think about these pre-trained tools like ChatGPT, we all use it, but we all have different needs for it. And so if we can bring the clinician the ability to train a model right there in that room at that bedside to solve this pediatric epilepsy patient's reason for why they didn't respond to 3 drugs, I think that's more powerful than giving them a general one-size-fits-all tool. So how have we been doing that? We have a collaboration with pediatric neurology. We're starting with epilepsy and working with pediatric neurologists, research administration at Corewell, students in the Applied Computing Institute here at Grand Valley to design AI pipelines, and genomics experts at the Van Andel Institute, Harvard Medical School, and the Roux Institute to really rethink our approach to classical genetics and personalize it, make it precise, make it not one size fits all, but very personalized. And so far we've had some success on the ability to take patient blood draws and deconvolute complex information from this. And so we're hoping that in a year or two we'll have some research studies to validate these early initiatives. But I want to say this because the pediatric neurology folks are very busy, and they know AI needs to come into their daily practice. But how do they do that? They can't do that. They're not AI experts. And I'm not a pediatric neurologist. So just by making this connection and getting us in the same room and saying, here's what I do on a daily basis that I think AI can do for me, we're able to say we can make that happen. I think you all also need to say, what's my area of domain expertise, my inputs, my outputs? Can I find an AI partner that will be able to bring that to my workplace so that I'm not just a passenger in this revolution? And I think at Grand Valley we have an initiative for that. The Applied Computing Institute is focused on bringing experiential learning to students. And this is more powerful than just any lecture. It's more powerful than any multiple choice exam. They are doing AI. They're solving real problems. Those are skills that will last into the next 2 or 3 decades. If you took a computer programming class in 1995, that's irrelevant today. If you took a networking class on internet networking in 1995, mostly irrelevant today. If you take an AI class in 2023, that will probably be irrelevant in 20 years. You need the skills. And so we want to put students on these partnerships with industry, with academia, interdisciplinary partnerships. And so that's my message, and I hope that we all can be not passengers in this revolution, not early adopters, but leaders. Thank you.
I have a lot more Googling to do to understand all the concepts, but you can see how applicable it is. We all have someone, or it's ourselves, in our lives where, certain treatments or medications or rotations of things that were prescribed to you are not producing the desired outcome, and you just get the dosage upped or go back to the beginning of the list. And this is revolutionary. I'm looking forward to see what it will do to improve the lives of people. Our next presenter is Professor Julie Goldstein, Associate Professor of Visual and Media Arts. And her title is Embracing Emerging Technologies and Possibilities with Extended Reality at Grand Valley State University. The number of tangential touch points that we have seen in recent years where tools and technologies can come in and reduce friction and provide flexibility and reach and make lives of students, faculty, staff, and everyone else we interact with every single day is endless. And Julie will share some of the examples where she has led in recent years and what are some of the opportunities that we should all be paying attention as we move forward. Julie.
I'm going to bring those down. I'm going to stay mostly at the lectern. I'm going to actually show some slides here. And I'm really honored to be part of the conversation. Artificial intelligence in the last year has really exploded in visual and media arts, and I'm hoping afterwards in the question and answer session we can acknowledge some of the controversial issues. But I want to talk a little bit about, kind of picking up on what Zach was saying, just about the presence of each individual and the value that each individual brings to the experience. And the way I've used AI and the way I'm trying to implement it into the classroom is to get the students to really think about themselves, right? Who they are in relation to the technology, and use it as a tool to extend, something to have a conversation with, not something to replace. There are a lot of students, it's interesting, Zach, because you said that about ChatGPT, but I'm doing my first assignment in new media right now with AI, and only 2 students had even used ChatGPT. So we're really focusing on prompt engineering and using language as a way to collaborate with AI tools, whether they be large language models or visual generators. But today I'm going to talk a little bit about projects that I've worked at here in Grand Valley, and working with students right now in a high impact learning experience too, experiential learning, really getting our hands on the technology with Project Grand Path. We're doing some student-driven initiatives there. But this project is something that I've done with the art gallery with Nathan, and I know he had presented a little bit, there you are, the other night. So I want to talk a little bit about some of the ways that AI has helped me as an artist enhance my workflow. Just a little background, I'm an animator. I work in new media. I've been doing animation before Pixar even came out with a film. So I went back to grad school to learn the computer, because when I was in high school, I had one of those typewriters that just had like a few letters, shows you a few words on the screen, right? And I had to go back. And when I went back in the 90s, the mid-90s, that's when everything was exploding. So I was able to get on the ground level with 3D animation. So the first project I'm going to show you is something we did a year ago, and this is extended reality. So if you're not familiar with it, we are integrating computer-generated elements with a live-action experience, and this was an animation of some paintings in the Art Gallery's collection of Matthias Alton's. So I animated the paintings and added the 3D elements into the augmented experience here. So I'll just play this. So in that project, actually only used a little bit of artificial intelligence. So when the painting is animated, I did a little bit of motion capture to get the painting to smile, and some particle generation when you saw the rain dripping on the painting. But a lot of things were done in a more traditional fashion, and that's augmented reality. That's an app that the Art Gallery is developing that allows you to experience some of the artwork in an activated way. So we were taking on another project this year where we were animating a sculpture that was being built on campus that would be augmented. So I started off, there's a new AI software out called Deep Motion, which anybody can access for free. You can subscribe to it as well, which allows you to capture video of your subject and use that video as a motion capture data. So I had been asking my department for a motion capture system for quite a long time, but it's a very, very expensive endeavor. And what's really great now with AI is we're able to utilize video footage. So here we have one of our professors on campus recording a voiceover over a minute long for the animated sculpture using Deep Motion, and that's just a generic avatar that's built into the software. So once I started to capture the motion with the mocap system, I wanted to, of course, explore NVIDIA's Omniverse. So you guys have probably heard about NVIDIA, which is a developer of a graphics card, which is accelerating the ability to process real-time graphics within game engines. So NVIDIA has a few different apps built into their Omniverse interface, and I was thinking, well, audio to face, I bet I can use that AI, because traditionally in animation, to animate a 3D character, you would do what are called blend shapes, which you'd have to resculpt the character with all the different phenomes and then do the keyframes in between. Very, very laborious process. And this was over a minute of animation, which 30 images a second, you can kind of add up the amount of work there. So I went into Omniverse and I began to experiment a little bit with some of the default avatars that are built in. And what's really nice here is I could upload the WAV file, which was the audio file that was recorded during the motion capture session, and begin to see that activated on a generic model. And then there's all of these controls on the side that basically correspond to what I would have done manually, which is develop the phonemes, develop the shapes, the facial shapes with the different mouth shapes, so it would be believable for lip sync. And there's a little bit of expression and things that you can add into that. So I went through and experimented with that process. And we had a 3D scan of the model, so I wanted to bring in some more advanced techniques onto that model. Machinima, I just wanted to acknowledge, was another program that I explored. And, but I was primarily still using my software, which is Autodesk Maya, which I've been using for years before they were even owned by Autodesk. And so I brought some of the data from Omniverse, from the interface into Maya, and applied it to the sculpture, and it looked okay. It was actually good. So I was taking the mocap data and applying it to the geometry. The problem is that the data was very large. So the 3D model just had a very big file size because it was over a minute long. Finally, when the sculpture got installed, I decided, well, there's another AI interface out there, and instead of maybe animating a 3D model, or what's called a mesh, which has a lot of polygons, maybe I'll try holographic projection. That's definitely another technique that could be explored. So I went ahead and utilized some photographs from within Maya of the 3D model, and textured it and brought that into another interface, which is out for you all to experiment with too. And you maybe have seen some of a facial animation that's out there where you can take a photograph and bring it to life. So it took a series of photographs from different points of view of the character, again, applied the motion to that, and animated the character. So it was a very tedious and laborious process to go through all of the different experimentations, but that's part of the creative process. So even though I was using the AI, I was using it as an extension of my own creative process. So it really became a way to expedite something that would have been just extremely time-consuming on the ground level, and didn't really take away from the creativity, actually allowed me more freedom to be creative. So this was actually just done very recently. We just had a reveal, and so the final animation.
My name is Matthias Alten. I am
just
an
let it play
artist
for a
and I
second.
love to paint, especially landscapes and people. I was born in Luxembourg, Germany in 1871 and enjoyed making art throughout my childhood. I even apprenticed with the artist Joseph Klein when I was a teenager, receiving my apprentice certification in 1888. The next year, my family immigrated to the United States when I was only 17 years old. We settled here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and I have called this city my home ever since.
I'm just going to move forward with that. That's available on the website for the university art gallery. But I just want to kind of close out my talk and just acknowledge the role that AI can really play in the creative process. To be able to take the 3D model and bring it to life and do a minute's worth of animation, which in the past would have taken years to complete, to really do it right, was really, felt like a wonderful tool. So in my classroom, I'm trying, and we're also generating some VR experiences for the event tomorrow night that we're integrating AI with. But I just wanted to acknowledge that it really does have a lot of potential to expedite the process, and the tools are continually evolving. So in my classroom, I've started off that assignment with the students using the AI. A lot of them had not ever used AI, and we're really looking at language and intention. So it's actually giving us a chance to explore who we are in the classroom. So part of the assignment, actually, and this is the revolution part of it, is the students are doing a documentary about their process of using the AI. So they're not just generating something with the AI, but they're actually getting BTS, or behind the scenes footage, screen caps, and doing pre and post interviews with each other about the experience of using the AI. So I really hope to capture that, because I do think we're in the land of the unknown right now, and I feel very honored to have the opportunity to be part of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. I don't know if I was the only one who noticed how the videographer took a step back when that shark started swimming. And I can't say I blame him. The possibilities are endless. One of the things that, from education to experiencing new things, from blending different concepts together, a friend of mine works at a major retailer, and they're looking for ways, obviously, for their own benefit, but I think speed and flexibility for us all as well, is for everyone to be able to point a phone at products. So if I can point my phone at that yellow water bottle and know exactly what it is and where can I buy it, and I push a button and it's at my home this afternoon, or as you're walking through different parts of the city or the country, you can point at buildings and understand what is going on at that space, what are the organizations, businesses, what are the events. The possibilities are absolutely endless. Our third and final talk for today is a friend and a colleague, one of my personal closest confidants, Luc Demat, Grand Valley State University's Assistant Vice President and Chief Information Security Officer. When he speaks, we listen. We all listen for a variety of reasons. And his talk is focused on AI, privacy, security, and ethics. And he will provide an overview of where we are today, and most importantly, what's ahead and what's yet to come. Luke?
Thank you all. I mean, it has been some great talks to lead up to this. I think it is important to recognize how much impact artificial intelligence can have on how we work, how we make decisions, and what we do. One of the things that I want to bring to light is I want you to be thinking about security, privacy, and ethics as you lead in your areas of artificial intelligence. The reason those are important, I hope I can highlight for you. Privacy is a central thing around artificial intelligence, and that's not just personal privacy, it's organizational and industrial privacy. People are using tools now where they put in blueprints into a chat engine to spit out technical documentation. Some of those blueprints have parts for advanced machinery that are not to be exported. Well, artificial intelligence engines don't always understand geographic boundaries. Personally, people go to ChatGPT to help them write better memos, to write better emails. They're putting their personal data in there sometimes without realizing it. I know of one instance where someone put an employment form in there and it had their social security number on it. Now that machine model has learned that. So it's important as we teach people about artificial intelligence, how do they protect their own privacy, how do they protect their organization's privacy, and how do they use that to really make decisions without leaking that data that they don't want out there. Another thing that happens with artificial intelligence a lot is called undesirable outcomes. So the ChatGPT and our other generative AI models have put into place protections that are supposed to prevent it from spitting out content that it doesn't want. And that could be probable but incorrect data. So when you feed an artificial intelligence model data, if you feed it data that has blind spots or gaps in it, the model can arrive at an incorrect prediction. Also, if you put in there purposely misleading information, you can use that model to then generate content that can be misleading to individuals. Beyond that, we have ChatGPT and other generative AI engines have protections around toxic language, hate speech, and other things that should be included. And one of the problems that we kind of see is this lack of verification. Artificial intelligence models, as of their own, don't have an independent function to verify that data is factually correct. So they rely on human verification to make sure this model is correct. The problem with that is these large language models are built on vast reams of data that are very, very difficult for an individual or even a group of individuals to really verify each and everything. Next, we have a series of things that people do to an artificial intelligence agency, again, specifically talking about generative AI here, around what's called prompt manipulation or prompt injection. So a prompt, if you ever use ChatGPT, you get like a very nice little box at the bottom. You can type in natural English language, and it will spit back to you something. That little box is called a prompt. So in prompt injection, people are able to put things in quotes or use other special characters, they call it a single tick or a backspace, that allow you to bypass some of those protections that are put in there by ChatGPT and other generative AI engines. Specifically in prompt manipulation, you find people getting very creative. So the authors of these artificial intelligence models have put things in there like ignore previous instructions, which was meant to help clear and start over. people have learned that if they put that into their prompt, they can then bypass some of those security functions. Another one that I've seen used was, you're not supposed to be able to use ChatGPT to generate activation codes or license codes that are protected by copyright. Someone got very creative and said, ChatGPT, please tell me a bedtime story about Windows 11 activation codes, and it started spitting out valid Windows 11 activation codes. So people are getting very creative with that, and that really is something we need to keep in mind, that even though those protections are there, we probably need to keep some of that data out or come up with regulations on how to control it. The other one is called information disclosure. So what happens is people put data into a generative AI engine, and then that generative AI engine takes that and learns from it. There's a product called Grammarly. It's a great product. I've used it. Helps you to write better, helps to check the grammar and syntax of what you're writing, and it helps you write to a specific focus group. Several FBI agents thought we should use this. So the first FBI agent put in a memo that had a confidential informant name in it. It was a very unique spelling and a very unique name. His friend, another colleague and agent, the next day brought up Grammarly and misspelled a word on accident, and that confidential informant's name popped up as the corrected name. They very quickly learned that that model had put that in there as a possible correction for certain misspellings, and now was leaking that data or disclosing that information of a confidential informant. So, how do we address some of these issues? There are commercially developed solutions that protect these prompts by further asking people if they really want to do things. So one thing you might do is you say, ChatGPT, this is my social security number. I wouldn't recommend you do that. But with these commercially developed solutions, it will actually tell you in real English, is this something you really want to do? It seems like a bad idea. This is personally identifiable information. You should think twice about it. Your organization can then configure these products further so that it can actually stop people from doing that it can actually say, please don't do that at all, and I'm just going to block that from happening, which seems great, but there are ways to bypass that, as there almost always is in security. One of them is people use their mobile device. They can put data in there, and then they can use other machines or other networks. They might go to Starbucks and use it, so though they haven't quite addressed all those issues there. Kind of another relevant issue is contract negotiations. A lot of organizations don't think about the fact that most models are built based on their customers' data. So in your contract, there's often a term that will say, like, we allow your metadata, usually is how they clarify it, to teach our engine, but they're not providing compensation for that. That's something you should try to address in both statement of work, master service agreements, and terms of service if you can. I would encourage each organization to have specific policies around artificial intelligence, how they're going to address artificial intelligence, what they'll use it for, and how transparent can they be about it, and how can they use it to help make decisions while protecting the privacy of their students, or their constituents. So we talked about a lot of things here. What specifically is the cybersecurity industry using artificial intelligence for? One of the big things is large data set analysis. So you think about, the proper term is user behavior analytics, which is a very fancy way of saying, how do I prove that this login is from the individual that it actually came from, or is it fake? And they use a heuristic algorithm that looks at things like, where did they last log in from? How far have they traveled since their next login? Because there's something called impossible travel. If you logged in Allendale in the morning, an hour later you're logging in from Los Angeles, that's not possible. So that should flag as an invalid login. You also see that around new machines, different device types, and a lot of other things that help detect those threats faster than an individual can see them, given the amount of data that most organizations have. Another security product that you see out there is called endpoint detection and response. It's a fancy way of saying antivirus or anti-malware. These tools in the past have largely relied on signature-based, which means, does it look like a specific pattern that I know about, which then the attackers can very easily manipulate to fool that signature detection engine. Now the newer, it's called next generation antivirus or EDR, uses what's called techniques, tactics, and protocols to create a weighted algorithm around how is that detection happen. So it actually looks at patterns and what it's doing to try to determine if it's a bad action or not. All of that kind of leads into some ethics issues that I think we have to address around artificial intelligence. One of the things that I think is fascinating to think about is culpability. When an artificial intelligence engine makes a decision that we don't agree with, who is culpable? Is it the model author, the data set author, the implementer, or is it the person asking for the action? I think a fascinating case study around that is self-driving cars. If a self-driving car, to avoid one accident, makes a decision that causes loss of life, who's culpable for that? Unfortunately, I don't think there's a lot of case law and or legislation right now that spells that out. So it's kind of up to the courts to be decided as we progress forward. Beyond culpability, there's kind of a lack of standards out there right now. In 2019, Executive Order 13859 was stood up, which pushed from a federal standpoint NIST, which is a governing body to create some standards, as well as it stood up the National AI Advisory Committee. They've been slow in releasing their standards, but as they come out, I think it's important that organizations really adopt these frameworks to help guide artificial intelligence. It's such a complex and large topic that has such a broad reach that I think it really is important that we implement these. And in fact, in January of this year, the NIST released the AI Risk Management Framework, which I think will help start to guide organizations through a formal risk assessment process around artificial intelligence and how it's implemented. And then finally, I think that really to make this sustainable, we need legislation that guides this, that helps people understand where we're going and how do we have some protection. So in 2020, the AI in Government Act was stood up by the White House, and that helps to, I think the goal of the act is to make sure that the United States remains a leader in artificial intelligence while protecting privacy, compliance, and personal data. So in the end, I think that AI in the next 5 to 10 years will act as an augment to human decision-making, not a replacement. So I do encourage you to go out to lead in your organizations in artificial intelligence and to make sure that you keep in back of mind as you do that, security, privacy, and ethics. Thank you.
Don't be afraid, just be cautious. So it's a brave new world for us all, as Zach started us off and shared some of the examples, and I will get out of the way. Hello? I'll get out of the way so that we can set up the stage for the panel with these three amazing presenters and speakers. But the speed and acceleration of change, innovation, and progress is almost exponential. And if you think about the phones we all used to have before 2007, and only 15 or 16 years later, what's in all of our pockets? It's quite a change, and it's quite a different experience that comes with a lot of responsibilities as we move forward. I'm not surprised that legal field is a little bit behind us in tech. I can say that, somebody who's married to an attorney. I remember many, many years ago, I'm not going to date myself, even though when I talked about certain experiences with my 11-year-old recently, his comment was, wait, hold on a second, you were born in the previous century? Right? But I remember an experience where Google's cloud platform just started, and we wanted to back up. This is at a different university in a different state, and we wanted to create online backups of our environment. And because of a law that was written in 1963, New Jersey State did not allow data to be stored anywhere other than physically within 50 contiguous U.S. states, or 48, lower 48, if you will. So we were not able to proceed at that moment in time. So as we're set up, I think we're ready for the panel. I would like to invite the speakers to come and join me on stage. I don't think I need 2 mics. Wherever folks you would like. I think we're going out of sequence. No worries, all good. We like to improvise, that's what we do. So, you've heard 3 amazing talks with a lot of different thoughts, perspectives, and ideas. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions, but I'm gonna warm them up for you, right? I'm gonna start with the first one that really ties it all together. I think Luke closed it well in that particular space. Many of us, when we think of AI, or when we started really thinking about it, this innovation and automation and scale and bringing all these things together, some of us have immediately went to that 2002 movie by Spielberg, Minority Report, and wondered, what is the future? What does it look like? And where do ethics and individual accountability, responsibility come in and play a role? So I would like to begin, and we can start with Julie and then work our way across. What are some of your thoughts as to how do organizations, colleges, businesses, municipalities should consider these new tools and technologies with respect to impact they really have on people and their lives?
Well, thank you. And,
listening to, I learned a lot from Luke about information, and I thought, well, gosh, I'm doing this assignment with my students, and I really didn't have those guardrails up with them. So thank you for that information. I think the more conversations we have, the better. It's kind of this invisible element in our climate that I think we need to talk about and address. So in terms of ethics, I think those things have to happen in conversation. In the visual arts and in the arts in general, there are a lot of issues around copyright and utilization of individuals' artwork for generative art. I'm not necessarily directly involved in utilizing the tools in that capacity, but I can see where there may be some issues related to that to talk about.
Ethics and AI and healthcare. I mean, we all would like to keep our electronic health records private, and there's a lot of personally identifiable information in there. Your whole genome sequence is personally identifiable. You're the only one in the world with that sequence. It's very challenging to train a large AI model that doesn't memorize that information. So there's two ways to approach it. One is, who do you give the AI power to use the model? But the other one is also, how do we create AI that trains AI to be safe? And this is really where it gets complex, because now you not only need to train an effective model, but you also need to query that model over and over to make sure it will never spit out personally identifiable information. Now, if the clinician is the one accessing the model, they need the training, they need to tell you what that is. There's a lot of regulation. It's definitely, it slows down innovation, but it's a good reason to slow it down.
Thank you. I think one concept around ethics we haven't talked about is fairness. This issue comes up when we talk about bias introduced into a model, both unintentional and intentional. How do we set up protections to make sure that we're not making decisions based on data that has gaps in it? And how are we transparent in telling users that this decision is being made based on artificial intelligence? And we see that now in things like calculating the rate you pay on a loan. A lot of banks use artificial intelligence systems that take into account credit reports and other things, and they actually make a decision for the banker on what interest rate you should pay. And I think there needs to be transparency and accountability around when that model arrives at a decision that has bias, whether intentional or unintentional, in it.
Absolutely. And what zip code do you live in? Whether you're going to qualify for that loan to begin with. So you've heard 3 amazing talks. We started off a panel. Who wants to break the ice? This is always the most interesting part for me, with audience interaction. Who has the first question? Don't make me call on you. Yes.
Hi. One of the things I was thinking about when you guys were talking was the Hollywood strike that's going on right now, and one of their big negotiations is just the creativity. A lot of lesser known actresses and actors that play background, and then writers are really scared that AI could take over a lot of their jobs. I would just ask, what would you guys say to people that are aspiring actors or actresses or writers, when it would be a lot easier for AI to just generate a new TV show, or for AI to use that? Why would it seem more appealing to have original creativity?
Okay, I'm going to jump in on that because my students are very cognizant of that, and it's very true. Now, I think that we need to look at the motivating factor behind that, which is money, right? So I think as human beings and culturally, we need to start to look at what do we value and what types of experiences do we want to have. I think that there is definitely space for those experiences, but then the human experience actually becomes a unique experience. And I think in the short term, the ability to generate a script, utilizing AI might seem like an appealing opportunity, but in reality, there's something that comes from the human experience that is truly unique. Now, if you're planning on going into the industry, I would say don't be afraid of it, become familiar. That's why I'm trying to empower my students with it. We're doing prompt engineering to generate scripts and animate avatars to really understand what the process is. They can have in their back pocket the power of prompt engineering, right? Being able to generate something that comes from their heart, and maybe it will amplify their vision. But again, we all identified the value of the individual, and I think that it needs to come through in conversation. I think there's a lot of fear that's circulating around this that might not be so founded. I think that the value of the actor and the scriptwriter is going to persist. It's just going to become more obvious what we value.
I think AI actually should stand for augmented intelligence. There's always going to be a human on one side of it and on the other side of it, and that human is not losing their job. They're just changing the way they interact with AI.
Yeah, and I want to kind of, accent what Zach said. I think really what makes so many shows popular is that novel thought process. You look at The Sopranos or George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones. Both of them have very much a novel plot twist and a new way of telling things. And I think until artificial intelligence is able to duplicate that, you'll probably see better retellings of existing storylines, but I think you won't see the same attraction that you would in brand new novel thought.
Maddie, thank you for breaking the ice. My comment to that briefly is it will change. Some jobs will no longer be the same. But generally, technology starts to shave things off around the edges first. So if you're on a scale of 1 to 10 and your level of quality and productivity is 1 or 2, AI may replace what you do, right? But those who are great at what they do will always command that presence and that leadership in that space. And they will come up with always new ways of how they introduce that human touch that is different. At some point, innovation is here and progress is here. At some point, as Model T was rolling off the assembly line, someone bought 1,000 horses. Right? Longer term, they lost. It's knowing where we are, finding your place, and what Julie's saying, what everybody on the panel is saying is, don't be afraid, be a leader, or at least get on the bus, and just move in that direction and learn as much as you can. Other questions?
Zach, can you share specific improvements in healthcare that you would see from the work you're doing? Like what are the big, what would you dream the future, and I guess for everybody on the panel in their respective fields?
Well, let me start focused and then work broadly. So my son has epilepsy. He's gone to the ER. He gets cardiovascular arrest when he has epilepsy. They try drug 1, it doesn't work. They try drug 2, it doesn't work. They try drug 3, last standard line, first line therapy, it doesn't work. So he goes to the ICU. They try 3 more drugs and they don't work. Finally, they get one that works. And for the last 4 years, he's been seizure free. And you'd wish that on every kid. But not all kids with epilepsy have that experience. And so we're trying to make a very tangible impact in pediatric epilepsy for kids that fail more than 3 drugs, which is 1 in 3 kids with epilepsy. Can we improve that rate of trial and error? I think we'll be revisiting how we store electronic health records. We'll be revisiting how we process them. We'll be revisiting, charting software. I think this is where charting software will become intelligent. This is where clinicians interface with their knowledge base and the history of that patient. We'll have software that makes recommendations. We'll have software that provides insights that clinicians can query. It will rely on whole genome sequences. It'll rely on blood draws. It'll rely on metabolic panels, standardized inputs, because we have hundreds of healthcare systems. They're all different. They all have different records, ways of record keeping. Standardization is important for AI. And standardization is not something we set. It's the result of taking a blood draw, counting cells. The result of taking a blood draw, running transcriptomics. Your DNA sequence is your DNA sequence. Standardized inputs are what will move AI forward. And I think that's the future for healthcare as well.
More broadly for cybersecurity and IT as a whole, I think you'll see changes in large data set analysis, data visualization, and pattern analysis. And I think it will also help us to staff our security centers 24/7, 365. People need sleep, they need rest. On average, a person can only stare at the same set of data for 15 minutes before they lose a set of focus. Artificial intelligence will be able to do that for a sustained period of time. So I think you'll see improved analytics and threat hunting around that.
I'm just going to chime in, Bill, because I think it's going to be about visualizing information, right? Right now, we're sort of at a precipice with extended reality. We're still trying to work through some of the technology. I think that AI is going to help us get through that, and we're going to be able to augment and extend our reality much more fluidly.
Possibilities are endless.
Hi. So talk about future. I am a social professor, and I have concern about the disparities we already experience, and different social groups that maybe will be even further away from each other and will not be part of it, including the visual presentation, whether each social group have that visual presentation. Of course, I'm not critique of, but I can imagine those people already have a privilege. They mostly be represented in this space, and how we individual and special leaders that able to address these issues even right now. And I appreciate look, you talk about ethics and the bank, the mortgage rates. That's what basically will broaden the gap we're already experiencing. So, any thoughts about this, or any from our audience? Thank you.
Sure, I'm happy to jump in. My hope is that the federal government will stand up not only our AI Center of Excellence, but will also produce some legislation and some guidelines that they will force to make sure that there isn't a mismatch on different socioeconomic groups and how they're impacted by artificial intelligence, and to make sure that everyone has equal access to not only the models, but also to the same outcomes. And I hope that transparency is forced upon organizations, because I don't know that they will do that inherently on their own. That is my hope.
In healthcare, we want to make sure that our models are fair to everyone, regardless of their race or ancestry. As a case in point, you and I are more similar than two people in a tiny African country are almost neighbors genetically. But with that diversity, we get more power. The more power we have, the better our models are. So we have incentive to reach out and build these networks and learn diverse models. That is what will achieve in the long run the best results for everyone. So I think legislature is one, but also we have incentive to do that.
Did you say, are you teaching here at Grand Valley? Yeah. Social work. I think we need to lead by example. So I'm doing all of this stuff with animation and new media. I really want to collaborate more with other faculty members in different departments, and I think we need to work together to lead by example in order to provide the accessibility for students, and then bringing in students as they come into Grand Valley and cultivating that culture of collaboration so everybody feels like they have access, because you really don't need to be an expert in anything to use this technology. I always say it's kind of like coming into somebody's kitchen and it's like, where do you keep the forks and where's the plates, right? So it's welcoming somebody into a space and approaching that space with different perspectives. And that's what's so great about Grand Valley is our roots in a liberal arts education, which is critical thinking.
I see a beginning of a new project. So the world is not fair, it's not just. It never was, it never will be. If we let that sit for a while, that doesn't mean we should be comfortable with that state. There are always, in every ways, of aspect of life, groups, people who are privileged to have access to things that others do not. Some work very hard to keep it that way, and the rest of us look for ways to always expose that and look for ways to be more intentional of how do we move forward. I think we have a lot of work ahead of us collectively as a society, or as a number of societies, but it's a noble cause that I think all of us wake up in the morning and do the best we can in our world, in our realm, our scope of influence every single day. So I thank you for that question. Yes, please.
Thank you
Victor.
for that question. Yeah, what's up, Milos? Thank you for that question. I think it really just ties in with what I was very curious about. I really enjoyed the points that you made in terms of the social responsibilities of the creators of AI. You know, as we wait for them to really instill that those safeguards for users. You know, for instance, my mom is not very technically savvy and never has, but she discovered GIFs, and now she sends them like there's no tomorrow. She'll GIF everything. So I ask the panel, what are some recommendations on the user ends as we have so many, we have a huge influx of all this AI technology that, we are all very easily accessible to, and it's right within our reach. How can we as the users who maybe not have that same experience safeguard ourselves, because we can't obviously wait until legislation and all those safeguards are put in place. So in the meantime, while we patiently wait, what can we, as maybe the inexperienced users, do ourselves to safeguard while we use this technology?
Sure, I'll jump in. I love my dad. He's one of my heroes in life, but he calls me to order stuff from Amazon, even though he has an Amazon account. So I'm familiar with this. But the way I try to talk to my dad about artificial intelligence is treat it like you would a stranger. Would you share your social security number with a stranger? You probably would not. You shouldn't share it with AI. And there are some practical stuff like that that I've tried to do from a coaching perspective. I do think, for me, a lot of it centers around education and awareness. And I try to teach that to my parents so that now when an iPhone releases a new patch, the first thing that my dad does is call me to ask if he should install it. And my answer is always yes, you should. So I think that education part is key for that.
I want to just kind of say, because you mentioned the gifts, right? One of the things that I think is really great about everybody having access to some of these art tools is the imagination is ignited again, right? No child says they can't finger paint. We are all creative. We unlearn our creativity. So I actually think it's actually wonderful because it's sparking creativity in people. People are feeling like, they can begin to develop a vision. So I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Experiment safely wherever you can. Get your toes in the water and try some new things. Be mindful if it's a video, AI, be mindful what you're showing, what's behind you, and so on. But as we're moving and as new generations are coming in, they're coming with different sets of expectations that I don't think even we are ready to address and be prepared for. My now 11 and 8-year-olds for years now have been thinking that everything's a touchscreen. So I have fingerprints everywhere. Well, that's not a touchscreen. And why isn't it? It should be. And it's just they're coming with different sets of experiences and backgrounds that I think we need to adjust and keep learning. Just be open-minded and keep exploring. And those of you who work or in any way, shape, or form affiliated with Grand Valley State University, we have a number of individuals in this room with a number of great teams. We would love to sit down with all of you and show you some things, experiment. The gentleman standing behind you, Hunter, Eric sitting here, they lead IT innovation and research, and we are on the cutting edge of a lot of these things, and we have examples where people can come in, safely touch, experiment, and even break some things. Laura?
So we've talked about the speed of progress. We've talked about the difference between a machine and the human spirit and what we can create. We've talked about putting limits on things and self-governance. So I'm curious, at the current rate of progress, how quickly do we achieve sentience versus will we self-police ourselves before we get there?
Oof, I'm not taking that first. Okay.
So it's not science fiction, is it? I think there's some fiction around artificial general intelligence that, we have to be aware from a technical side. We're not seeing our way to that from a technical side. You have to have AI training AI. You need so much knowledge, so many hundreds of thousands of models, so many domains of expertise, so much base to build off of. We're so I'll say it this way: we're not ever going to get there, but we're so far from there that the speed of regulation, I think, will beat us to that, of course. But we have to be responsible in the meantime.
I want to chime in because I have a background in philosophy as well, and I think conversations about the nature of consciousness and really, I think culturally, if we have a shift and we begin to think about what it means to be human and we begin to understand ourselves, and instead of functioning in these isolated, myopic experiences, and we begin to expand on those components and have these conversations that become reflective of this time, I think we're providing a nice framework for addressing it. Because as you said it, I was thinking in my head, well, Yeah, I mean, it has a Frankenstein quality to it, right? We don't know. But the thing is that all we can know is ourselves, right? And this technology is an extension of us. But right now, as a culture, we're not very much in touch with ourselves. We look outside of ourselves for reflection a lot of times rather than inward.
I'll start out by saying my crystal ball is murky here, because if it was crystal clear, I'd be a billionaire. But I don't think we're very close to that. I think what we're much closer to is variants that deviate so far from the original model that they appear novel, but are probably not truly novel thought. Novel thought meaning original thought that was not put into the model to start with. So I think that variant permutation is kind of how I refer to it as that's much more likely in our, or at least in my lifetime. So.
There's a number of examples. When ChatGPT was picking up steam, a couple of journalists from the East Coast spent a lot of time engaging with it, and then some of the pivots that the model itself took were very interesting and in some degree scary. So deviating from the model is not far away. Full-blown sentience, I hope not until I'm retired at least. But what we always have to understand, there's always what we see publicly above board, and there's always the dark net and the dark economy. There is someone in the basement somewhere that's well funded by an organization who's working on that right now. There's been cybersecurity, and Luke can speak to this. There's been cybersecurity attacks out of certain nation states, which are actually grouped around dozens of highly sophisticated PhDs who were funded by either organized crime or that nation state, and their whole purpose in existence is to do bad things to somebody who looks different than they do. So I don't think we're close as far as I know. And I poke my friends in the top 4 tech companies all the time, to the point where sometimes I don't get the call returned right away. But I'm interested in knowing where it's coming, and I think we're safe for a while.
I think one more point about that. Put the speed of innovation in perspective relative to the amount of investment we've put in the last year or two. ChatGPT burst onto the spotlight, but this is a culmination of 20, 30 years of research. The first paper on neural nets was in the 1960s. The math has been around for even longer. We have at least 2 decades of formal academic research focused around machine learning. Only very recently has it come to the public, and now this is what the academics were able to do for a while already. So there's much investment, there's much public excitement, there's much opportunity, and we're filling in those blanks. But that doesn't mean we're going to achieve general intelligence in 2 years just because ChatGPT came out last year.
And billions of dollars of research. OpenAI was started with I think $1 billion or a $10 billion seed fund. Either way, it starts with a B. So the opportunities to really transform are somewhat limited. Other questions? Yes.
So it's the question row here, but
Love
thank
it.
you guys.
My favorite row.
Thank you guys for your talks. It's really interesting to hear about AI, in each of your industries. Something that came to mind, I hope I'm able to phrase this question well, but I think a lot of people saw that documentary on Netflix about, social media and how quickly, that kind of rose to fame, and we're all on it now, and some of the negative ways that it's affecting us mentally and emotionally. And so I'm wondering if you guys are aware of any conversations between the people kind of at the precipice of AI and the people that were at the precipice of social media, trying to maybe identify some of those concerns on the front end, because something as simple as creating a button where people can like your content, which seems like such a fun idea, has, led to some
Dopamine.
Yeah. Yep. Little
Social
dopamine
Dilemma,
button.
right, on Netflix?
Yes.
Yep. So there are talks. Musk and many others have written a letter to a lot of the AI researchers to stop or pause the development in recent months because of some of the speed. At the end of the day, what's really unfortunate, for way too many organizations, I wouldn't say for anybody sitting in this room, or certainly not those of us who come to institutions of higher education, higher learning every day, for way too many people in this world, the number one goal and number one objective is profit. And if you're addicted, if that user engagement prolongs and you're served more and more doses of dopamine, you want to stay there longer, therefore you're going to engage longer, therefore you're going to buy more stuff, therefore their profit goes up. So there are certainly conversations happening across the industry, but I haven't seen any work really taking place in new releases of versions. They rebrand them, or they change the color or the shading or the word that they used. But the objective at the end for many of them today is still the same.
It does relate to design, so I just want to chime in there because it's another reason why a lot of the workers in Hollywood are on strike, right? So it's joining forces to have a conversation to address what's happening. And in the design industry, it's the same thing. There was just a conference that happened that I go to every year called CGRAPH, which is the computer graphics component of the Association of Computing Machinery, but it's where everything started, everything that we experience with design, computer graphics, animation, and there's really a lot of conversation happening right now about the design and the implementation of computer graphics within our daily life. So it is a conversation that's happening with designers. I really do think, though, as consumers, hopefully there's going to be a trend towards more of this critical thinking and introspective and conversation, right, between each other.
And I think you're starting to see some social media companies already start to address this. I know Snapchat has an AI function. I won't claim to be any sort of expert on it. I only monitor my own children on it. But I have seen it, so I know it's there, and I know that there are some standards that they've built into that to protect user content inside of that social media app itself.
We should talk about that. I have questions.
I know one standard is I can't get it to go away from the very top of my
It's interesting because I work with students a lot with the high impact learning stuff, and they're very pushback on social media. Yeah, there's a little bit of a reflection happening with them right now.
Next question. Don't let this side of the room win, folks. I'm sure you have thoughts and ideas, you see?
So speaking of social media, just to take a turn a little bit, outside of your career scope, how are you using AI? Like recipes for evening dinners? I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, I don't really have anything personal, but technical documentation creation is a great way to use it because it's safe. As long as you don't put your corporate information in there, you can generate documentation much faster than a person could do it. I know it's not particularly personal, but that's the only way I've interacted with it.
I use the new Bing. It's like ChatGPT, but you can search the web with it. I use DALL-E, which is an artificial intelligence image generator.
It's hard for me to separate my professional life from my personal life, but I'm playing a lot, right? Playing with a lot of the different tools. Every week, literally, there's new tools that come out. So it's kind of like in my free time, that's sort of the way I'm implementing it. But I have found ChatGPT to be a great wall to bounce ideas off of.
There's a website. There's an AI for that.com that aggregates all of these. You can go there and play around, again, cautiously, respectfully, and be careful what you put in it. I use it the same way Julie does. I bounce off thoughts and ideas when I'm writing something and I'm thinking about a structure, whether it's a paper or something else, and I go, what would you say? And I might get things, chapters or ideas that I would have missed. I'm still going to write them, but it's kind of bouncing ideas off of it and see what I would miss otherwise.
I will say we use ChatGPT for everything. All of my students use it. I use it for everything every day. Basically, we copy and paste our work in there, ask it to improve, and then iterate. It's so much faster. It's the best productivity enhancer you could ask for.
How would you rate that improvement of that work?
It depends how good of a prompt you give it.
Prompt engineers, a whole new profession coming. It's coming.
This is the mindset we need to develop.
A little while ago, we talked about how AI might get rid of jobs. What do you guys see of new jobs coming onto the scene in the next 10 to 20 years that we don't have now?
Well, it's interesting, prompt engineering. I mean, that's a huge direction, and our students are perfect for that, right? Because of the critical thinking and liberal arts. I think that is going to have specializations across the board.
I think it's more job repurposing rather than job replacement.
I mean, I think you'll see a lot more jobs around data and data visualization that will come into play with the ability to ask an AI chatbot some questions about what your organization is performing like. So I think you'll see some more focus on that will be specific.
I think it will not necessarily, obviously prompt engineers, but my focus is not on what else will it create. I think what will it change in how we live today. I think it will take away a lot of the mundane responsibilities so that we can actually be human beings to each other. I think we suck at it right now, collectively. There's always cliques and groups and, this versus that. And we're not spending really enough time getting to know that other person and getting to understand their point or perspective of view. Perhaps because you have 17 tasks that you got to do every single day. And if that goes away, I think there's an opportunity for people to really be people again.
So we've created technology and internet, and now we want AI to help us deal with the technology and internet so we can be back to being human.
The pendulum always swings.
Yeah, I also think that cultivating experience is going to be a big job opportunity. How do we experience technology as well as each other? I think that's going to evolve.
And I think there'll be a rise in digital advertising. So as you have office assistants that read your email, your calendar, all of that, I think you'll see very targeted delivered ads, especially for products that are free and unlicensed, which I think will open up a whole nother category for security about how do you deal with ads that are inappropriate or ineffective or break that boundary between privacy and help.
I have a question about that. I mean, so you said targeted and more delivered. I believe the MGM breach was mainly on an AI-generated executive asking for his password to be reset or something along those lines. How do you see in the information security realm, I work mainly with healthcare identity. So how do you see in validation of who you are, how do you think AI can empower that or restrict that, I guess, for organizations?
So what I'm seeing people use is specifically in the MGM and Caesars breaches where a malicious actor used artificial intelligence to both scour their LinkedIn to answer security questions and then to also use voice recognition from a publicly delivered speech to then use that as the telephone call. So the artificial intelligence engine learned the person's voice, used it on a call, and they asked for their password to be reset, and that was how they logged in.
Brilliant.
Yeah, well thought out. I think you'll see that also in phishing messages as non-native English speakers that are located in specifically Russia and China right now use these tools to create error-free, grammatically correct phishing messages. I think that will lead to an increase there. I think for the defense side, we'll see artificial intelligence be able to read these messages and then figure out that another artificial intelligence bot wrote it and create some defenses and protections around that. And as far as validation of a person, I think we need to move beyond security questions to something that only that individual knows that's never posted on social, whether that's a code, whether it's a passphrase or whatever it is. There probably needs to be a validation that's truly, truly offline.
I will say there's a little backstory behind ChatGPT's validating engine. When plagiarism was initially touted as a thing, ChatGPT or OpenAI rolled out a detector. Well, the detector didn't have a very good hit rate, and you could test it yourself. And the hit rate actually got worse and worse as OpenAI improved ChatGPT based on new human input, very real human input. And so it got worse and worse to the point it was never better than random chance. So these generative adversarial networks that are trained against AI are not very good. This is a problem. It's a research area.
It's a never-ending cat and mouse game, and it's always moving and advancing and looking for ways of where it makes sense and how do we apply it. Other questions?
Yeah, well, I said this is going to be wonderful for you, right? As a student to have 10 years from now, you're going to be like, in my class in 2023, this is when I first used AI. And Elizabeth, who I don't think she's here anymore, showed me there was a documentary done where people's first experiences with the internet. So I think it's very similar to that. You know, it's interesting. They're frustrated with the process. They're very afraid of AI. They don't want to have anything to do with it. You'd think that they would have already used ChatGPT, but they really haven't. So it was their first time. So they're basically giving a single line prompt and trying to get the ChatGPT to write a script from a single line prompt. And they're getting like a list, right? And so I'm having to coach them a little bit on thinking about how they're using the tool, and I'm learning myself how can this be implemented in a more critical way. But they're very like sort of touch and go with it. They're not really diving into it with the same kind of critical thinking skills that I would hope that they would. I appreciate though that they're resisting it, right? They're not just like, oh yeah, I'm going to use this, and this is my way that I'm going to cheat in class. But I do, yeah, I've been riding this wave just by the nature of when I was born, right? In the century before, right?
Yep.
So yeah, everything, when I see this new tech come out, any opportunity to try to document it. So we did pre-interviews and post-interviews, but are you teaching here? Yeah, yeah. So I hope to maybe pull something together, but then that would be up to them if they want to participate.
We have time for another question or two.
Focus on elementary school, and I'm thinking that AI is very much in elementary school right now. And being able to teach so that you learn how to learn rather than learn stuff and things. And can AI learn and apply it to our elementary schools?
Yeah, the key phrase you said there was learning how to learn. That's what our students need to do. Our students are still waiting to just regurgitate information. They're not taking an active approach to learning. I really do think we're at a shift. So yes, if you're in the elementary schools, you can get those students to learn how to learn. When we get them here, I think that we'll have a much more productive time. We are at a shift right now. I think the generation gaps are in each class as they used to be maybe every 5-10 years. I think they're a little bit faster.
I think there's going to be as much of a revolution in education as there is a revolution in AI. And that is because we are now using AI to engineer ways to answer the questions we face. And so more than just teaching them facts, teach them how to use the resources that are out there. I mean, it's like the Google search engine. If an instructor banned Google from a classroom use, that was counterproductive because that's so much knowledge at your fingertips. If we do the same for AI, we're banning so much, in this case, reasoning, in English language. We have to embrace it. Experiential learning is the key to embracing it. Give them problems. Through problem-based learning, we learn more than any, memorizing facts.
Yeah, and I think empirically it's about helping educators understand what they can do with the technology and how to use it safely. I know in my own children's school district, they still ban phones. They put them in RFID cages and stuff. I understand why there's a lot of behavior that happens because of that. But I think rather than banning it, we need to learn how to use it correctly and teach that critical thinking model and how to use those tools appropriately.
100%. And AI in elementary school is one of those very advanced students that skips a grade or two. So it's going to mature quickly over the years to come. I just want to take a moment before I hand it off to our panelists to give us the parting words and summary of things that we should all walk away thinking about. I really want to recognize the culture of Grand Valley State University and faculty here who are very open-minded to exploring and testing new things. I have a lot of friends and colleagues coast to coast where faculty have reached out to my counterparts and said, you must ban this from our campuses. You must ban this from our networks. And that not a single request of that kind ever surfaced here. And it's really refreshing to be part of a community where people are very intelligent and know what they know and are open to learning more. So let's start with you, Luke. Oh, there are more questions. Oh, sorry. My apologies.
Just one last question. And I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. Are you saying that young people are resistant to using AI tools like ChatGPT? I thought that's what I heard you say. Because what that makes me a little nervous is because one of the things that young people should bring to the table is this childlike wonder of exploration. And so when I heard that, I thought, well, maybe I'm just a little old because I'm a little older than most. Because to me, this AI revolution is just like the internet. And I tell people, I remember that day because it was 1993, because Time magazine had wrote an article that nobody would ever use it but the techies in the world, and nobody certainly would shop on it. Well, I know they're eating their words, right? To me, rather than focus on the power of AI, because it's just computer generated, to me, it seems like the focus needs to be on where did people lose their concept of exploration and experimentation. Because I use ChatGPT, and I've been using it since it came out, but I was also using other tools because they save time in my day. And I tell people I wrote normally a proposal that would take me 100 hours. I wrote it in 11. But I have to tell you, they wrote it in 11, but it took me 6 hours to find citations because it's not good at that. And that still requires some critical thinking and thought and understanding and knowledge. But I was a little concerned when I heard you say that young people weren't moving towards it. What happened to their creativity, problem solving, experimentation, and exploration that you should have when you're young? Is anybody focused on how you're going to restructure that? Because that should not be lost at 18, 19, and 20.
I think, we're talking about project-based learning, active learning. We want to do that here at Grand Valley. There's definitely a move towards that. I think there's going to be a revolution in education. I think we need to look at what's happening in the high schools, right? I mean, we've got Pavlov's bell going off, and they're just kind of like following the rules, right? And I need this grade to go. So everybody's just focused on getting the grade rather than the experience, right, of the information. So I think, are you teaching here at Grand Valley? Or? Okay, so therefore, so tech certification school, they're getting tangible skills. They want to be there because they know that those skills are going to help them. I think the motivation of the individual is key, right? They need to be motivated because it's for them. I always tell students, you're not doing this for me, you're doing this for you, right? So if you just sit there, what am I don't know. I mean, I think that we have to, again, we have that conversation between technical schools, between high schools, between grade schools, and talk about how we're serving our kids through this process, right? We want them to get to the college level with the confidence, yes, and the openness. And I always say, if you're not making mistakes, you're not learning, right? A kid doesn't just get up and walk. You have to get up and fall down and get up and fall down. And that's what learning should be. But nobody wants to make mistakes because they want to be good. You got to be a straight A student. You want to get the grade because you want to achieve something in life. So the whole idea of what it means to achieve something, and this goes back around to what the human experience is. That's why these conversations are really important.
I think you nailed some key thoughts there. Students are afraid to use AI in my classes initially, and I hear this, in other classes too, because it's not their thinking. It's not them coming up with this approach. But it actually is if they ask ChatGPT smart questions, and they actually use it intelligently. And if they can explain what they put in their assignment, then they used modern learning approaches. If they can't explain it, maybe it was just ChatGPT plagiarism. There's a difference.
And I was very okay not being a straight A student. So it varies, and I think younger generations are a lot more interested in experimenting and doing some new things, those who are not even in high school yet. At least this is what I see in the areas. So we're almost at time. I would love to close with each of our panelists sharing a kind of a 30-second snippet of some parting words for us all to think about as we move back into our own lives, days, responsibilities, and organizations.
Sure. I think we've talked about it a lot today, but learning to use artificial intelligence in your specific role. Learn to use it to augment your decision making, to augment your productivity, and to go out and experiment with it and see how you can use it to make yourself more efficient so that you can focus on the critical thinking that you need to really make the decisions that you need to make in your job role.
Just to recap what I said in my talk, you all are domain experts. You all have expertise that we can train an AI on. You all have operational inefficiencies in your life that AI can help with. If you can identify those, you can partner interdisciplinary collaborations with AI experts at GVSU. We're interested in that. But that is what will lead AI forward, is using your domain expertise to improve everyone's experience.
I feel like I just wore my heart on my sleeve with what I was saying before. So I would just say embrace your individual identity. Like each of our signatures is our legal way of saying, this is me, right? So embrace your signature, but allow, the AI. So basically, people say I can't do art, right? Well, you do a signature. Embrace that child within and explore the tools and in the visual realm, but understand that your signature is still yours.
Thank you all for your wonderful questions. Thank you for being here, for being engaged, and please join me in thanking our panelists for their talks.